The audience bursts into laughter live on television under the bright studio lights. The host, known for her sarcasm and provocations, mocks Jonathan Roumie's faith with a smug smile. She asks, "Jonathan, do you really believe there's someone up there watching over you, especially after everything you've been through?" More laughter follows. Camera cuts show Jonathan remaining silent. He gently holds the small cross hanging around his neck. His eyes are calm and steady. Unshaken, he doesn't react, doesn't argue, he simply feels. Then a deep, intense voice cuts through the air. What that host didn't know was that she was about to experience a moment that would not only challenge her view on faith, but possibly change her life. Jonathan Roumie is not just an actor known for playing Jesus in The Chosen. He reflects someone who faced losses, uncertainties, rejections, and still stands tall. Not because of fame, not because of strength, but because of something the world tries to mock night after night: faith. Stay with us until the end to see how this story unfolds. And before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from. We love hearing from you and always read everything. The studio was lit like an arena. Ceiling lights crossed overhead, reflecting on the sleek black walls. The audience applauded and murmured in anticipation, as if about to witness a comedy show, a scandal, or maybe both. The program was known for its controversy, sarcasm, and interviews that felt more like verbal duels. When the host stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted. "Ladies and gentlemen, he is an actor, producer, director, and apparently a bit of a monk too. Please welcome, with thunderous applause, Jonathan Roumie." The applause was deafening. Jonathan entered with calm steps, dark jeans, black blazer, simple t-shirt, and subtly hanging around his neck, a cross. The accessory contrasted with his discreet look, but more than that, it seemed to carry something profound. He nodded in greeting and smiled softly. No hurry, no grand gestures. He sat down like someone who had already faced tough phases of life, and this was just another one. The first questions followed the expected path: career, behind the scenes of The Chosen, curious moments with fans. Jonathan answered kindly and calmly. The mood was light. The audience laughed. But gradually, as always on this show, the tone began to shift. "Jonathan," said the host with a sly smile, "you seem like a pretty down-to-earth guy, maybe even spiritual. But tell me one thing. Do you still believe in miracles? After everything Hollywood has shown you? After everything life took away from you?" The audience laughed. Jonathan did not. His eyes remained calm but reflective. He didn't answer immediately. He just listened. It was the kind of silence more spiritual than any word. The host joked again. More laughter. Jonathan lowered his eyes for a second and gently touched the cross with his fingers. A simple gesture, almost imperceptible, but full of meaning. The camera zoomed in slightly. The cross swung with the movement of his hand. Then he looked up. Calm. Director. Still no verbal response. Just presence. The conversation moved forward. More jokes about spirituality, ironic comments about faith, dogmas, and religion as emotional escape. The audience laughed again, but something in the air changed, a silent crack in the usual rhythm of the show. Then came a sharper question. "Do you really think there's someone up there watching over you?" Jonathan was silent for a few seconds. The audience waited. It was a crucial moment. One wrong word, and he would become just another meme. But if his words were true, maybe something would change that night. Then he spoke with calm and firm voice, just above a whisper. "If I'm still standing after everything I've lived through, it wasn't just luck." The phrase landed like a stone in a lake. Waves of silence spread. The laughter ceased. People exchanged looks as if asking, "Did you feel that too?" The camera cut back to the necklace. The cross now seemed heavier, more real. It was not decoration, it was a statement. The host tried to change the mood with another joke, but the laughter was weak. Something had shifted. Jonathan remained firm, never combative, never defensive, just observant, present. What no one noticed was that, in that show, Jonathan's cross would not be just a symbol. It would be the trigger for a turning point no one was ready to witness. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the conversation continued. The energy in the room had changed since his silent statement. What began as a typical night of entertainment now hovered between discomfort and reflection. The host leaned forward with a forced smile. The mood was not going where she wanted. But she was not finished yet. "So, Jonathan, let's talk about religion, since we're here anyway," she said. The audience laughed again, but not with the same freedom as before. She began speaking in a livelier tone, sprinkled with sarcasm. "You know what I always say? Religion is like a fairy tale for people afraid to grow up. Those ideas of a divine plan are comforting, sure, but let's face it, they're not exactly real." The laughter was louder. Some people applauded. It was clear they were returning to the usual routine of the show. Jonathan did not falter, didn't roll his eyes, didn't move, didn't even sigh. He just held the cross again, didn't grip it, didn't make a show, just rested his fingers on it as one who anchors himself to something greater. The camera caught him once more. No sign of panic in his body language. No defense. Just stillness. While the audience enjoyed the jokes, the screen began to subtly change. The voice of a narrator appeared, gentle, thoughtful, distant. What the world saw on that stage was a man being tested, but what the world didn't see was the path that led him there. The image faded to gray tones. Grainy footage appeared, moments from the past. Jonathan, still young, crying alone on a church bench, the loss of his father, financial hardships, years trying to pursue an acting career while working as a waiter, delivery man, production assistant, pains he never let turn into bitterness. His pain became grace, his silence, prayer, then real voices, improvised testimonies, brief but touching stories. A driver. "He gave me a $500 tip. I thought it was a mistake. He just smiled and said, 'You were kind.' The world needs more of that." A woman. "My car was overheating at a gas station. He didn't just help. He stayed there for almost an hour. No cameras, no rush." A fan. "I was crying on the street. He sat next to me like he knew me. Didn't ask anything. Just stayed." Back in the studio, the host was still trying to provoke a reaction. She quoted Bible verses with theatrical exaggeration, mocking the tone of old sermons. "The meek shall inherit the earth? Ha! Good luck with that in Los Angeles." She laughed. The audience did too, but there was something different in the air. Less conviction that it was all just a joke. The room didn't seem as tall as before. There were long silences between the laughs. Jonathan Roumie remained quiet, but the host, perhaps bothered by this silence, turned to him again, this time with frustration in her voice. "Why do you want? You're really not going to say anything? I mean, do you seriously believe there's someone out there watching over you?" For the first time that night, Jonathan looked directly at her. There was no hardness in his gaze, just depth. And then he spoke. "If I'm still here, if I'm still standing after everything, it's not just for me." It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. No theatrics, no performance, just truth. The audience fell silent for the second time that night, but this time, it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was reverence. Even the cameras seemed to slow down. The atmosphere had changed. Something deeper was now running beneath the surface. The host tried to regain control of the conversation, shifted in her chair, and let out a tense laugh. "Ah, well, that got heavy. Maybe we should talk about stunts or puppies or something lighter." Some nervous laughs escaped the audience, but quickly faded. On screen, the narrator's voice returned. "What does it mean to have faith in silence? To carry pain without letting it turn into bitterness?" Jonathan never preached on pulpits. He never needed to post sermons. His life was the sermon. Black and white scenes appeared on the screen. They weren't from movies. They were real moments. Jonathan Roumie, alone, at the funeral of a close friend, a vacant look, hands gripping the sleeves of his coat, a man emptied by loss. Another flash. Years later, a subway in New York. He sits among strangers, unnoticed, bent over, silent, in a corner seat, his head slightly tilted, as if listening to a world no one else could hear. There is a burden some carry, and carry alone. Not because they want to be strong, but because the world gives them no other choice. Real voices began to overlap on the soundtrack. I was an extra on a set. He always arrived early, never complained. One day he saw me limping and offered me his chair. I was just background. My mother was dying in the hospital. He appeared out of nowhere, sat with us for 15 minutes. Never said he was famous. He paid for my brother's surgery, never told anyone. The hospital was the one who informed us. Back in the studio, the host forced a smile and leaned toward Jonathan again. You know people like to romanticize suffering. They say pain makes us deeper, more human. But pain is just pain, right? It doesn't make you wiser, it just ruins things. She laughed bitterly. Jonathan didn't interrupt. He just listened. Present, steady, not to argue on, but to witness. She sighed and gestured with her hand as if to brush everything away. I mean, look at you. You wear a cross around your neck, fine. But do you really think that means anything? It's just symbolic fashion, right? The room fell silent. Jonathan slowly turned his gaze to her. His voice was steady, yet calm, with a quiet edge that hadn't been there before. I don't wear it for fashion. I wear it for memory, for forgiveness, for survival. His words were not dramatic. They were lived, as if he had repeated them many times, in the dark, when no one was watching. The camera zoomed slightly on the necklace. This time, it didn't look like just an object. It looked like a story, a scar, a reminder. The host was silent. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The audience didn't move either. No phones, no distractions, no laughter, just presence. The narrator's voice returned one last time. In a world obsessed with loud opinions, there is something profoundly sacred about someone who chooses only to live what they believe. Jonathan said nothing more. He just breathed and held the space. The host cleared her throat and tried to smile again. But this time it didn't reach her eyes. Something inside her was breaking. And then, what no one expected happened. The person who mocked him the most was the first to break. The show returned from commercial break, but something had changed. The studio was quieter. The audience, once ready to laugh at anything, now sat with wide eyes, hearts strangely attentive. Even the lighting seemed different, as if the cameras knew that. The next part wasn't scripted. The host returned to her seat, composed, but not like before. She looked at Jonathan, then at her own hands. One trembled slightly. She tried to laugh, but her voice faltered. Okay, she said, almost a whisper. Let's talk about something real. Jonathan didn't move. He just waited, patient, present. She took a deep breath and leaned forward. Her tone was different now. Lower, without masks. When I was little, I prayed every night. I closed my eyes tight and asked God to make me normal. I didn't even know what that meant. I just thought that if I were normal, I wouldn't be so afraid all the time. I wouldn't feel wrong. The silence in the audience was no longer tense. It was sacred. And I prayed, please don't let me go to hell. Please let me be enough, just the way I am. But nothing happened. I waited for a sign, a voice, anything, a sigh, but nothing. Eventually I stopped asking and started laughing at it all. She smiled, but with watery eyes. At the prayers, the books, the people who still believed. I told myself it's all fiction, just a security blanket for those who can't deal with the world. Pause. Maybe I wasn't laughing at your faith, Jonathan. Maybe I was laughing at my pain. Jonathan looked at her kindly. No judgment, no pity, just compassion. The camera captured the moment he leaned slightly forward and spoke in an almost inaudible tone. No one who suffers while praying is alone. Someone always listens, even if you don't realize it. Nothing moved. A woman in the audience wiped away a tear. Another held her breath. The host blinked slowly, her facade slipping even more. I thought silence meant no one was listening, she whispered. But maybe I just didn't know how to listen back. The camera slowly pulled away. No spotlights, no dramatic music. Just two people. Real. Bare. Alive. Jonathan said nothing more, and he didn't have to. The host looked at him. Really looked, and nodded almost imperceptibly, as if to say, thank you. Or maybe, I'm still here. The narrator's voice finally. Sometimes the hardest part of healing is admitting you need it. And sometimes the most powerful confession is simply telling the truth. But that moment of vulnerability was far from the end. What no one in the studio knew was that, backstage, something even more revealing was about to explode. And not even the cameras would be able to contain what came next. Hours after the show aired, clips began spreading like wildfire across the internet. Jonathan Roumie's silent presence, the tremor in the host's voice, the way the studio had fallen into complete silence. Everything felt different, authentic, something impossible to fake. But backstage, things were starting to fall apart. A video secretly recorded by someone on the technical crew started circulating on social media. At first, it seemed irrelevant, just the usual talk among producers during the commercial break. But then a clear, sharp voice cut through the ambient noise. We want things about God pushed. She needs to poke him, make him react. That's what goes viral. Another voice responded, are you sure he's not the type to fight back? That's exactly why it will work. He is restrained. The video went viral within minutes. At first, it seemed like just another backstage gossip. But soon after, a former producer spoke out in a live broadcast. Visibly nervous but determined, he looked into the camera and said, I worked on this show for 3 years. There were always instructions, sometimes implicit, sometimes written, to push guests who openly spoke about faith. It wasn't curiosity, it was provocation. He paused, took a deep breath, and continued. I saw the notes for today's episode. They wanted her to provoke Jonathan Roumie. Rigid screenshots of internal memos began circulating, suggesting jokes and questions specifically prepared to ridicule the topic of Christian faith. The hashtag #RespectFaith started trending on social media. What began as a simple interview now seemed like a premeditated ambush. But the plan failed. Jonathan didn't fight back. He didn't shout. He didn't try to win anyone over with words. He just stayed genuine. More voices started joining the online storm. Actors, musicians, people from all corners said, there is strength in silence. Faith doesn't need to shout to be powerful. The respect Jonathan showed, even when provoked, carried more grace than anything the show had ever produced. Even people with no religious connection joined the conversation, not to defend a doctrine, but to defend the right to believe. The tone had shifted. The host was silent for several days. No posts, no comments. But late at night, a tweet appeared on her account. Some moments on live TV aren't scripted. They are human. Tonight I was human. Still processing what that means. Comments multiplied. Some were outraged, others forgiving. Many simply asking one question, why? Backstage leaks continued. A former production assistant posted, they told us Jonathan wouldn't cause trouble, that he was too polite to confront. But what they didn't expect was that his silence would say it all. The press caught the story. Journalists debated. Psychologists were invited to morning shows to discuss the emotional impact of moral silence in modern media. Even satire programs covered the subject with an unusual reverence. One of them said, it's strange, but something in that moment made us stop laughing. Jonathan didn't respond publicly. No interviews, no statements, no phrases. Only a single image posted on his Instagram, his cross on a closed book. No caption. The post was shared over 6 million times in one day. People left their own interpretations. The book is closed, but the message speaks. Faith under fire. The silent warriors. In the following days, the conversation only grew. Opinion articles sprang up from all sides, some praising Jonathan's composure, others criticizing the show's ethics, and many reflecting on something deeper, the spiritual hunger in a world mocking belief. The host, interviewed by another network, appeared tired. No heavy makeup, no extravagant outfit. Her voice was low. I didn't expect to feel anything. I really thought it would be just another interview. But he didn't argue. He didn't ridicule me. He just listened. And that moved me in a way I wasn't prepared for. What started as an interview had become a cultural reckoning, but no one was ready for what would come the following week. The network announced a second interview with Jonathan Roumie, Live Again. This time the promotion was different. No sarcasm, no provocative slogans, just one sentence. The conversation that moved the world continues. On the scheduled night, the studio was packed. Lines stretched for blocks. People held signs. Silence also speaks. Faith is not flawed. More Jonathan, less noise. The energy was electric, not like before, when everyone expected to laugh. Now it felt like something important was about to happen. Jonathan entered the studio the same way as before, calm, serene, with the cross hanging from his neck. The host greeted him, visibly nervous, her voice softer. There was vulnerability there. "Thank you for agreeing to come back," she said. Jonathan just smiled and replied, "Thank you for having me." She opened with a gentle question. "How did you feel after the last interview?" But before he could answer, something strange happened. The lights flickered. It wasn't subtle, a sudden pulse. The monitors behind them failed. The audience murmured, surprised. The sound technician leaned forward in the booth. And then, total silence. The microphones cut out. The lights dimmed to almost complete darkness. The hum of the studio vanished. For 10 seconds, the entire set plunged into a quiet so dense it felt otherworldly. Jonathan didn't move. Sitting, hands resting on his lap, the cross still gleamed under the emergency lights. The host stared at him, frozen. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the technical crew hesitated to intervene. Then everything returned to normal. The lights stabilized. The sound came back. The monitors rebooted. But something had changed. The host was stunned, silent, her eyes full, not of fear, but of something deeper. She turned to Jonathan and said with a trembling voice, "I don't know what that was." Jonathan looked into her eyes calmly. "It's not about winning debates," he replied quietly. "It's about touching souls." And for a moment, the world seemed to stop again. The audience didn't applaud, didn't shout. They just stayed there with him, with her. It was as if, for a single breath in time, everyone in that room remembered something the world has been forgetting. Silence, presence, reverence. The narrator's voice returned. "There are moments that logic cannot explain. Moments science tries to label as failure, coincidence, technical error. But what if it was none of that? What if, for the blink of an eye, the world just bowed?" Technicians later blamed the silence on a system reboot, an overload, a bug. But no one really believed that. Not after what they saw, not after what they felt. The clip, 10 seconds of darkness, followed by 10 seconds of silence, became the most viewed moment in the show's history. Not because something was said, but because everything was felt. That moment, which seemed like a mere technical glitch, would become one of the most analyzed and deeply personal videos ever shared online. And what Jonathan Roumie did next would touch even the hardest hearts. The silence video. That 10-second pause during the live broadcast exploded across the internet. It was everywhere. Talk shows replayed it. Analysts slowed down the footage. Podcasts turned it into metaphors. Some claimed it was a malfunction. Others swore it was divine. But what no one could deny was that it had changed people. Millions watched not just once, but repeatedly. Not to understand what happened, but to feel again what it made them feel. A strange stillness, an inexplicable peace. In a world that screams all the time, that silence said more than any argument could. Jonathan Roumie didn't make statements, didn't give interviews, didn't try to explain. He simply posted a single photo, a wooden table, a well-worn closed book. On top, his cross, resting gently. The caption? "Sometimes silence is the most powerful answer." He didn't need to trend, didn't need hashtags. The message found its own way, straight into people's hearts. The next day, the show's host, the same one who had sarcastically interrupted Jonathan, appeared on social media. No makeup, no lighting, just her in her phone camera. Her voice was softer, her eyes swollen. I didn't know what I was doing that night. I thought I was in control. I thought the goal was to win. But he didn't try to win. He just held the space. A pause. And maybe, just maybe, God spoke to me that night, and I finally stopped laughing long enough to listen. The internet didn't cancel her. On the contrary, to everyone's surprise, it embraced her. People saw something in her breakdown. Not weakness, not a fall from grace, but a moment of honesty, a moment that mirrored something within themselves. Soon after, a wave began. The hashtag number sign, "My faith is not a failure," flooded social media. Not defending Jonathan, but as testimony. From people of all beliefs, and even none, stories poured like rivers. A woman wrote, "I stopped wearing my cross necklace after a friend mocked me. Today, I put it back on." A teenager posted, "I never believed in anything, but maybe I can start believing in that peace." A man from Brazil wrote, "My mother prayed for me every night. I used to roll my eyes. Today I called to thank her." Churches, mosques, synagogues, meditation circles, all shared the same phrase. Faith doesn't need to shout. While news networks called in experts, some tried to explain that moment of silence with technical terms. A power drop? A software glitch? But others went deeper. A neurologist said, "The body responds to that clip as it does to sacred music. Heart beats slow, cortisol decreases. That moment affected people physiologically." A therapist added, "We're not used to people holding space in silence without fighting. That moment was an emotional reset." Culturally, it was no longer about agreeing or disagreeing. It was about remembering something we all had forgotten, that the presence of grace and truth doesn't need volume. Days later, the host stepped away from the show. No scandal, no headlines. He just posted, "Some conversations are more important than the content. Thank you, Jonathan." He did not respond publicly. But the next day, a new photo appeared, a lit candle. Next to it, a folded note. It simply said, "You were heard." The video narrator returned for a final reflection. Jonathan Roumie did not try to preach. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He carried the pain, without turning it into a weapon. And in a world addicted to noise, he reminded us, faith is not weakness, and silence can be sacred. As the final scenes played, an emotional montage began. A child in a hospital room, watching the video and whispering, "This is what calm looks like." A father hugging his daughter at the airport, both wearing cross necklaces. A group of strangers gathered silently on a rooftop, without phones, just breathing. And finally, Jonathan Roumie walking alone through a quiet park, the sun setting behind him, the cross resting gently against his chest. Maybe this story was never about television. Maybe it was never about Jonathan Roumie. Maybe this was the beginning of something awakening inside all of us, the kind of faith that does not need to shout to be heard.